Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Beyond the Groom Podcast. Our esteemed guest at this time is a doctor of veterinary medicine, a graduate of Colorado State University. He was the founder and chief veterinarian of Animal Health Services, and of course is the U.S. distributor for Yves Saint Bernard Italian pet grooming products. Dr. Cliff Faver, welcome to the program and thank you for being here. You work obviously with your lovely wife, and I'll ask you about that in a moment, but you have a rich background, a rich history, veterinary medicine, and also in the grooming industry, and Suzanne really tackles that aspect of it. But you also have a vast array of knowledge when it comes to business, being an entrepreneur, and you implement that into not only your seminars, but into the Pet Skin Academy. So where do you get all your business acumen from? Is it trial and error over the years? You were not only the chief veterinarian, but you were the owner of Animal Health Services. So where do you apply that business knowledge? Where does that come from? And how do you communicate that to an aspiring groomer?
Well, first of all, I always brag, if you can say that, about I never had a business course in my life. And why I say that is because it hasn't tainted me that this is the only way to do business, which makes me think outside the box, makes me work harder to try to figure out what the right way is. I will tell you, when I got out of school, one of the first things I learned, because I bought my first practice a year out of school. And I had an associate at the time that really wasn't business oriented. So I realized I had to learn business. And so I spent a lot of time in business courses. And after a few years, I realized, number one, I could have taught the course because I've been to so many of them that there again, repetitiveness, I knew it pretty much. And then I got a little frustrated because as I left that practice and went on to another one, I grew it to a point that those classes were no longer valid on that. And at that point, I actually got connected with a veterinary management group, which basically had about 20 practices that were about the same size, in the same situation where we'd outgrown the normal on that. And so we acted as basically each other's board of directors. We had professionals come in and teach us at all different levels, from just basic business to estate planning to exit strategies to, just the whole gambit, so that we could learn at a much higher level on that. And, that was probably one of the big life-changing events to me. I was in it for many years. If you own your own business, if you're not successful in your business, you can't be successful in your trade. And that's why I think it's very, very important for groomers to understand the business aspect of it. Now, as a whole, and this is across the board, most artists are not mathematicians. Those two things don't seem to go well together on that. So, a lot of times, because most groomers are artistic, that's not their forte. And I don't know that a lot of them really enjoy that part of it. And I understand that, but I also understand if you don't take care of business, you're going to have troubles, you're going to fail. And it saddens me to see how many groomers that are working so hard and getting so little return on it. And I was there. When I got involved in the veterinary management group, they evaluated our practice. And, at that point, I had a thriving practice that was worth almost nothing because there was no profit in it. And so you realize at the end of the day, not that you should be driven by the money, but you have to be driven to the point of survival, that you're making enough that you can survive well, you can take care of your kids, send them to college if they want to go to college, you can have a new car every 10 years at least, or at least have a semblance of a good life, because otherwise the question is, why are we doing this on that? So I find it very, very important, and we talk about it on a very basic level in our pet esthetician program, because what I found is some of the smartest people that have graduated from my class are failing in business, and because of that, they're not able to use their knowledge of the pet esthetician in order to move forward. So to me, it's a package deal. If you're smart but you can't market yourself, you can't do business, that's a recipe for failure on that. So those other things have to be a part of it. So in my classes, I share just basic stuff. It's not rocket science on that. It's just to help people kind of go to the next step. And even in my demonstrations at the booth, I will talk about, economics and that, because a lot of times groomers get wrapped up in the thought that they are going to save their way into prosperity. And cutting, pennies on the dollar of your shampoo is not going to make you rich. For the simple reason, if your quality is not good walking out the door, then that client a lot of times moves on down the street. If you have the top quality product there, then clients are going to flock to you because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for value. They're not looking for cheap services. They're looking for value on that. The ones that are looking for cheap services are the ones that are going to create nightmares and make you lay awake at night worrying about the complaints you got that day. So it's just an important part. And like I say, I think it's an area that probably isn't emphasized enough. And a lot of times we need, in an industry like this, we need to bring out people that are successful, that understand grooming, to be able to teach it. A lot of groomers that teach it, I question, I don't even know whether they had successful salons themselves. So what makes them authority to speak about that? So a lot of times there, again, bad advice is bad advice on that. So that's kind of where I come from.
I was going to ask you, and you kind of already answered it, but I was going to say, do you think part of that comes from most groomers? I'm sure at least they start out this way. They are very empathetic. They're very compassionate. They want to help as many people as possible. But you kind of answered that already, because if you offer your services up for free, or you feel like you're obligated to do it, you almost provide no value if you don't value it yourself. So it's a tough question, but is there a way to juggle helping as many people as you can and still being somewhat profit oriented to the point where you have to keep your doors open to have a practice to help animals in the first place?
Well, yes and no. The wisdom will tell you have to make your money first before you can help other people. If you're not putting bread on the table, you're not taking care of your kids, you really aren't in a position to help others on that. So the important thing is run a good business so that you can do those kind of things. If your heart's in charity, the better your business is run, the more charity you can give out there. But if you're struggling yourself, you can only cut that pie so thin before then you start suffering. Or as I told my employees, the best gift I can give you is to have a healthy business so you have a job tomorrow. If I give away the farm, if I don't take care of business and we fail, then there's 68 of us out looking for jobs tomorrow. So I have an obligation as a business owner to run a good business so that I can take care of my clients, I can take care of my staff, and I can take care of me all together there. So it's important, have that healthy business first, then start helping people on that. And definitely, charity has always been in my background. I've helped multiple rescues. I've started multiple rescues. I've been involved in them at all different levels on that. I had a point that I was probably given over $100,000 a year to rescue on that. So to me, it's important to do that. But in the same token, if you don't have a healthy business, you cannot give that kind of benefit to the others on that. So. And the thing that you find out on doing that kind of work is a lot of times it's not appreciated, or like I say, you give it for free for a therapy and they don't even show up. So you have to learn to pick and choose, what's good and what's not. And, I actually reached a point in my career that I took a big step back and say, okay, I'm helping all these people. If I got in troubles, which ones of them would help me? And that was a real eye-opener to me. And it didn't stop me from doing charity work, but it made me very picky about who I did charity work for. Because if I'm going to help somebody, and that's probably talking more about individuals, if I'm going to help this individual because they're in a bad status right now, when they get into a good status, would they help me? And you have to really look at that. And a lot of times we give away things that really people are unappreciative or take for granted.
I knew I was going to get some life lesson every time I talk to you. I always do. Grooming is a metaphor for a lot of life lessons that we talk about. With that in mind, what are some of the biggest differences when it comes to grooming for competition versus grooming for general health? I want to ask this to Suzanne too. I will eventually, but in your opinion, I'll state it again. What are some of the differences between grooming for general health and then grooming for competition?
Well, I think they're two totally different ball games. Grooming for competition is for pretty, or for conformation, or that we have a standard that we have created there, and very commonly that has nothing to do with health. In fact, if you look at the grooming in United States versus the grooming in Europe, they're totally and completely different. In Europe, they groom for function. In the United States, we tend to groom for pretty on that. If you want to blow a European's mind, take them to a creative grooming class contest, because to them that is just totally ludicrous that you would take a functional dog and make them non-functional. Is essentially the way they look at it. But a lot of things that we do in the competition is not necessarily for the health on that. So when we talk about health, we're talking about, taking care of the hair and skin and doing that. When we start putting hairspray in there, if we start using dish soap to create volume and all these things, they're not necessarily for the health. In fact, a lot of the show people get into problems because, let's just take, for example, a poodle, is when they get ready for show, the Continentals, they want lots of volume. So what they do is they will bathe the dogs in Palmolive dish soap, which actually opens up the cuticle, which creates volume. The problem is when that cuticle's open, it becomes very fragile and the hairs tend to break off. So in an area like California that you could hit a dog show every weekend, after a few dog shows and doing this, if you're not conditioning in between, that hair gets brittle and starts breaking off. And if you go to the shows late in the season, you're going to see lots of wiggies, which are basically hair extensions. And one the size of your thumb may cost $150 to $200. And I've heard stories of up to 14 in one dog, which that many, you question if they have any hair left or not. And the judges a lot of times just look the other way. I had one judge that he's kind of laughing. He said, I had to disqualify the best in show at this one show because the dog put its head down and one of the wiggies fell out. So I had to disqualify him. But a lot of things we've done for the show ring are not for the health. And it's skewed us to a certain extent on that. Because really, my opinion, the function of groomer is to clean the dog, bring the skin and hair back to health, and put an acceptable type groom on that. And a lot of times people are so in awe of some of the competitive groomers, but if you see what they do day to day, it's not the same. They don't have an hour or two to deal with each one of these dogs. So it's at a much different level. And the reality is, if you really look at it, what's the client looking for? They want to know that they look good, smell good, and feel good, and you love their dog. I've seen some of the worst grooms with the happiest clients because they smelled good and they felt good. They didn't itch when they came out. So, to them, that's what they were looking for. They weren't looking for a showpiece.
Obviously, I know it's a net positive overall, and ultimately it's going to serve the animal best. But does the grooming process, I'm sure it's uncomfortable, but does it actually hurt the animal when whatever treatment or bath is? The baths look like they actually enjoy once they get in the water. But does the grooming process hurt an animal?
As a whole, no. But there are different things out there that can hurt the animal. And for example, we'll take de-sheds for one. A lot of times the groomers will bring a dog in that's matted and needs to be de-shed. And one of the things they do is they brush the dog out. Well, if you understand the process, the dried sebum and dirt's holding or cemented that hair in. So if I go to ripping and tearing with a brush, I'm creating pain on that. And that's a prime example of you can use a different technique and release that hair so that you're not causing pain in the process. but not everybody looks at it that way. You know, a lot of times this is the way we've always done it. So, you know, they just grin and bear it and let the dog scream. You know, and that's not a happy place to me. You know, if we've got a better way to do that, we should be using the less invasive, the less aggressive nature on that. So, you know, a lot of that's learning the right techniques and thinking about what you do, because, you know, just routine bathing and grooming and brushing and that, no, there's no pain involved in that. But when we start letting these coats get too far along, and a lot of the problem is with the owner, because if the owner's not bringing them in on a regular basis, they're setting their dog up for that pain and the irritation, because sometimes there is no good way out of this. You know, at best we may have to just shave them down, but even that, if those mats are really tight, then that's going to cause some pain. That's going to cause some irritation. A lot of times cause secondary infection. So there's a lot of things that are involved in that. And that's why it's important for the owners to do their part and make sure that we get in there. And you know, that should be a 4-week cycle. You know, if we're waiting 8 weeks, we're pushing it. If we're waiting longer than that, you're just asking for problems, especially with the longer haired dogs on that.
Changing course a little bit, what advice would you have for someone who's thinking about getting into business with their spouse or significant other? You seem to balance it very well. What's the magic formula?
You know, I think the common passion, the fact that we both love what we do, the fact that we both have a common goal, then that's important. And I think that's probably the biggest issue that you run into with spouses working together, is if they don't have a common goal. You know, if one spouse is just working there because the other one is, that doesn't always work, because the goal's not the same, the passion's not the same on the overall. You know, and we see this a lot in veterinary medicine. And in fact, I talked to a consultant once, and he said, I won't even go into a practice and consult when the husband and wife are both working at the practice, because invariably, he said, the person you need to fire is usually the spouse on that. So it creates a bad scenario. You know, I see in the grooming world, actually, there probably works out much better than it does in the veterinary field. And I really can't give you the answer on that unless it goes back to the passion aspect of it. That, you know, I see a lot of husbands, especially, you know, when they're late in their career and decide to change, that they go in and start bathing for their wives and absolutely love it, and do very well. In fact, we've had several husband-wife combinations that have come through our pet esthetician program. You know, and every one of them seems like they're doing very, very well in the process.
All the ones that I've met they're not only wonderful people, but I've met a few at trade shows and a few on site at Cave Creek, and they all seem to get along very well. So they are bucking the norm, or whatever trend or whatever preconceived notion there was. I don't know if it's animals bring people together. So I think that might be part of it. Has Suzanne ever gotten sick of you though? Or has she ever been like, I've had enough of you today, Cliff?
You know, we're humans, and we probably may have those passing thoughts, but I really can't think of any time that we really got to that point. You know, we definitely have different opinions. Getting married later in life, you know, we come from different backgrounds to a certain extent. So you always have those little things, but never anything that was of any magnitude, never anything that really caused a major fallout by any means. You know, I always say you want to be married to your best friend, and I truly believe that's what makes it work. She is my best friend. We love doing the same things. We have a passion for traveling. We have a passion for animals. You know, so we can live our best lives together on that.